Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Speaking of Patrons, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon. So, a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to Phoenix Rising 86, Retro Bill, More Books, Cannabear, Fibre Oats, Bogey, Michael Kahn, Rob H, Ben White, John Kays, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Will Brax, Mel B. Styles, Troy Shuker, Harry Blade, Mobile Max 777, Neo the One, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Dal West Watson, Maria Neelands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, The Real Gabster, Liam Nedrick Jr., Abraham Mohammed, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic 936, Life is Short, Texas Mike, and David Wayne Foster. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. Now I will hand over to whoever is in Discord and Google so you can enjoy their dulcet tones while I set up for today's live show. Didn't I say yesterday on the live show, for all you watching live, I appreciate the zero flashing and everything functioning well and me being in a good mood.
You did, but I just wanted to make sure it was 2 days in a row of it.
You asked that question too late.
I'm pretty sure when I pulled the graphics card out and saw a load of water stains on the top plate, I was like, oh, that could be the problem. Now, I didn't notice when I cleaned it out, so I took it outside and it was in daylight, but when all the components are in, you can't necessarily see clearly what's going on with them, you know what I mean? There's other stuff blocking your view. But yeah, as soon as I pulled it out, I was like, whoa, that shouldn't really be working at all.
Stop drinking coffee by your computer.
As I said, I don't.
What do you mean you had to? You spilled coffee on it. What, did it get there by accident?
No, I'm saying that I've got 2 kids, and there's a good chance that one of them is not necessarily coffee, but whatever was in there has got on there somehow. I vaguely remember knocking a coffee cup off near, and there being a vague hint of a splash perhaps getting in there, and my wife doing the same, knocking a cup off near and going, oh, did a splash get in? But this wasn't that. It wasn't without showing you. I mean, I think I might have took a picture of it. I can't remember. But I certainly showed Anthony on Skype. I was like, look at this. And he was like, whoa. But it wasn't like a splash from a cup that had fallen near, which I may have said in the past, oh, I spilled a coffee cup on my PC, or, not, I wouldn't have said it in those words, but, vaguely alluding to the idea that some liquid might have got in there. Well, by comparison to what was on the graphics card, I'm saying no, it definitely isn't a cup maybe splashing a little bit.
Are you experiencing some other good results because it's a new card besides just the flashing?
No. I mean, the show ran fine as far as I was aware. I mean, as the card got older, it got hotter, so it was making more and more noise. And I actually thought that was the problem, so hence I ramped up the fans, and it seemed to solve the problem, keeping it cooler. But it ultimately didn't. It would still do it eventually. So I think that was actually just maybe coincidence. Turning up the fans helped. But yeah, it was getting hotter and hotter, which meant it was getting noisier and noisier, which is irritating. I wanted to be silent.
We all know after the acoustic treatment how noise is a problem for the show being done right.
Well, it's not that it's a problem. It's just it's a nicer environment without going on right next to your right ear.
Wow, you just made the sound my son's PlayStation is making.
Right, exactly.
It's really loud.
Yeah, about 60 or 70 hertz. The sound of a fan, basically. Just deeply irritating.
Yeah, but I don't remember his PlayStation making that sound when I first got it for him. So
yeah,
I don't know what the heck's going on.
Entropy.
That's what it is, right?
No, I think your son's drinking coffee.
You're a bit quiet, Tenth. You're quite far from your mic.
No, it's the same spot. Let me see. How about now? Is this good?
Maybe turn it up a little bit. I don't know. Is it just me? Hold on. Let me just check. Oh, it's me. It's me.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
coming in loud on the Discord, Nate.
No. It's me. I haven't turned up my preamp. So
All
that
right.
means. Hold on. I'll just change that slightly. I'll just rephrase it. Neil, you're miles too loud.
How do I adjust that? Because I have the plug-in headphones that you get with the phone, so my mic is in the same spot always.
Oh, it's fine. Generally speaking, you blast people's eardrums out. It's just the way it is.
No, I hear how loud I am when I listen to the show again.
Just lower your tone. Just speak a bit quieter. Know that your mic's really sensitive, and you don't have to raise your voice.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
Hey, John.
Morning, fellas. Morning.
Morning.
Nathan, I got a couple of slides of Masterby I'd like to go over with.
Okay. The ones before the Hangout was published.
The one with the red. Let me see.
Latitude and how to find it.
Yeah, it's probably it. Hold on a second. I just lost it. Oh boy, there we go. Yeah, that's it. All right, so we're going to read it first and look at the picture, which is the next slide, and then we'll come back and read it again. Dip 7b, which is the image we'll be looking at as soon as I finish reading, is an error introduced by the fact that the observer's eye at O, would that be an apostrophe, is elevated above the surface of the earth, making his horizon OH with apostrophes instead of OH without it. You go down to the bottom because it talks about dip, parallax, and semi-diameter changes in some of the other images. These are corrections they do. These corrections cause very little trouble as they have all been calculated and lumped into one sum for various sextant angles and for different heights of eye above the water. To find the amount which must be added to the observed altitude to get the true altitude, it is only necessary to turn to table 46 in Bowditch's American Practical Navigator and enter the table with the altitude and the height of eye and pick out the tabulated figure in which all these corrections are combined. Generally speaking, this correction will mean the addition of about 10 or 12 minutes. All right, let's go to the next slide. There's a slide for refraction. There's a slide for parallax, semi-diameter, but we want the top right, dip. So you see OH, that is the plane that is not curved, that's on the surface or just barely touching the curved surface. You see that plane right there? And then you see the dotted line, which is the observer's eye to what they call the sensible horizon, but he's not using a bubble sextant, so he can't really do that. So then OH, the I, and H at the bottom of the curved surface that doesn't exist in the dingleberry, they just inserted that. This, like Brian says, doesn't belong here. What they need is OH, which is the straight baseline without the apostrophe. So
it's an apostrophe. So it's H and H apostrophe. So in this one, where the line marked OH meets the curved surface, that point is the geometric tangent point formerly known as Earth curve. And
Correct.
This point is redundant. So when Brian points it out, this is what you're actually utilizing, OH, a flat plane. Not
Correct.
OH apostrophe to a physical geometric sphere edge horizon that we can't see with a straight line to it. So why is it that refraction is for celestial objects accounted for, why aren't these lines bent at a rate of 7/6 Well, I'll tell you why. Because they wouldn't be giving you angles. See this little grey area denoting an angle measurement? Well, if the line was bent, as it is in this refracted line, then this line with its grey area makes no sense anymore. Because it's not an angle. It's got a curved line attached to it.
Let's go back to the writing. Very good summary, by the way. All right, on the writing, under the 7b, dip is an error introduced by the fact that the observer's eye, O apostrophe, is elevated above the surface of the earth. Now, get that, surface of the earth. It's elevated above the surface of the earth, making his horizon OH instead of OH without the apostrophe. Now go to the image. They're telling you the surface of the earth is OH, the plane. The rest is make-up gobbledygook.
Wow.
His eye height is raised above the OH. That's straight. And that's what they call the surface of the earth. And yet they showed this circle, this dingleberry, this magician's trick to make you think it's OH with apostrophe. It doesn't even belong there.
We only have one horizon, right? So the fact that they've got two H's, H is horizon. Well, in this image, Muppet Vision, they're saying you've got two horizons.
Yeah.
No, we haven't. And the one we use is H without the apostrophe. Flat plane.
And they even, and they even tell you it's elevated above the surface of the earth, which you need to get it to, which is OH. They're telling you the surface is flat.
Right.
How are they not seeing this, though? I don't understand this. Even the guy yesterday, when Tent breaks this down, it's so concise. I don't know.
Because when you got a diagram like the one on screen on my presentation, right, with Al-Biruni, when people see Al-Biruni measuring a flat plane to get the height of the mountain, it represents itself in a very similar way. You've got both on this diagram, right? So when he's standing, let's say he's standing at point B, right? Well, is he standing on the surface of a sphere Earth when he makes that measurement? No, he's not. But he's going to use a flat plane to do it. So he's levitating. No, he's just on the ground. But after he goes up the mountain that he's just measured the height off a flat plane with, he then derives a geometric tangent point. Back to your diagram. Well, there's the geometric tangent point, and there's the flat plane that Al-Biruni's got measured. It's the same cluster screw of nonsense in figure 7b as it is in Al-Biruni's, going up the height that he's got from the flat plane and then showing the diagram literally right next to the sphere Earth with the geometric second horizon in... I don't know why it's backwards, but it's marked C. Anyway, yeah, so it looks weird. But for some reason, they just show this weirdness like a, what did we call it? The Dingleberry Earth, right? So you just extend this line, which Al-Biruni's getting his height of the mountain off, to beyond the plane, and suddenly what? They're all good with that? Yeah, we just teeter-totter a great big flat plane on the top of the sphere. That's all good. Because Adam did this going, we'll make it look absurd by just combining both of Al-Biruni's claim to be measurements. Well, the first measurement needed a flat plane, the second one violated it, because it's then got a bent line that doesn't match with the plane he measured. But like I say, you stuffed this on the page 85 of a sextant manual or whatever, and people will go, yeah, there you go, this is how you do it. See, you just stand out here in outer space, measuring a flat plane, the thing you're actually standing on, and then when you go up the mountain, you decide that flat plane that you originally used is irrelevant, and here's your horizon. A different horizon that we don't see, can't be seen, is never expected to be seen, only exists in the maths, formerly known as Earth curve.
Okay, I got another image following those two. Can you go to that one?
It looks like some protractors, yeah. So,
okay, no, this is you're gonna love this. All right, so this on the left side is they're trying to mirror the previous picture by showing you the surface of the sea curved, and there's a ship, and then you've got the sun, and then you've got the angle measured, which is that straight line, which is the sensible horizon to them, okay, before dip correction. And then you've got the dip showing over that apostrophe H, over a curve which doesn't exist. Okay, so they're showing you this. Now let's read it. Figure 2. The correction for dip and its cause, the altitude of the sun above the horizontal plane, is desired. The altitude of the sun over the horizontal plane is desired. Here, the horizontal plane is the eye line where the navigator is holding the sextant. It would have to be a bubble sextant that he's using here, or an artificial horizon with Mercury, but he's not. He's using a marine sextant, okay? So they got that eye line, sensible horizon, that's horizontal, and it's the plane that is to be desired. So the dip correction must be subtracted from the observed altitude, which is from his eye line, of course. The sketch greatly exaggerates the size of the correction. To say the least, it's false, but listen to how the writing is. Now, if you look to the right, look how they draw it from the equatorial plane. There is no curve. So basically, when we look at the previous image 7b, the correction from the sensible horizon, O apostrophe, to the dotted line, which is that horizontal plane at the eye line, and you're shooting the horizon at sea, the actual sea horizon, your dip correction is height of eye above the sea surface. So all you do is bring it down, so you have a parallel horizontal line matching each other. And on the right, they show it from the equatorial plane where there is no curvature to be exaggerated. Do you see it?
Right, I don't know where you get those. I suppose it's the $1,000 or so more that you spent on books that leads you to these, right?
Well, I do research. I've got like so many folders where I just throw them in each folder and then go back with the move and travel time. I really don't have time to put it all together, but I just went to this one part and I seen these pictures before, and I said, okay, because we had a discussion yesterday, I'll just highlight it and put it up again. So the whole point is, once you understand and see enough of these images and how they interchange them, here in this one, they're honest. They're saying the sketch greatly exaggerates the size of the correction. Well, it's true, but it's also not true because there is no curve to adjust to, but they draw a curve. You see, but then when they're actually saying is you got to have it match the sensible horizon that you get from your eye line. Okay, well, what's that? That's straight. Well, then they say the surface has to be that. Well, then that's straight. Then why do you draw the arc of a curved earth then? It's just made up. And then they show that everything is geared in the books from the center of the earth, so it's never over any arc. It's from an equatorial plane. So once you start seeing this, you say, wait a minute, if the books are already predetermined from an equatorial plane, which is straight, 180, straight angle is 180, so it's like, then why are you doing this on the surface of an arc that doesn't exist?
Because they can't do it on there. They have to do it on flat. That's
Right.
the problem. It's trickery, man.
Well, let's
The
see
arc
if you
is
pass the test. Because how is it? Can you get an angle from a curved baseline, Neil?
No, the arc is the
Negative.
angle. The arc is the hijacking of the angle itself, isn't it? So where we see the guy stood underneath the celestial sphere on a flat plane, well, when you dissect the celestial sphere, what you've got is a protractor. Or if you didn't, you could just use a 360-degree protractor. But that's what you've got. The midpoint, the line that's 0, is the plane that you're standing on. So this image here, on screen, it's got a star, and it's saying, oh, look, you've got the altitude, that's elevation angle to the star, straight line to the star, right, to give you an angle off a flat plane. This is what we were detailing earlier. Well, when you cut through the centre of this circle, which is actually the angle, you're left with this circle that you're going to be measuring on the surface of the sphere. Well, that's not on the surface of the sphere, because the angle is then left with you stood with a protractor over the top of you. So the protractor is this curve. It's the angle of the tool. And they're saying that's the surface of the ground you're standing on. And then they do this nonsense, teeter-tottering triangles on top of the sphere. Like, no, that's not how you get the angle. You'd be in the middle of it. But hence they do exactly that and put you at the centre of the presupposed spherical Earth. The Earth becomes the protractor.
Yes, I got it. It's over.
Would one of you three like to do housekeeping today?
That's a 10th man job.
I can do it if you like.
I don't mind. I just thought it'd be big, just to mix it up a bit, really.
Hang on, I got one more image to put up. We got a few minutes here, right? So
Yeah, I got my
I
quarter.
want to ask you.
Go on, John.
I was wanting to ask you, Nathan. When you first started this channel, did you want to be the moderator when you first started it?
I don't really know what you mean.
Well, you were wanting to start a debate channel. Was you just wanting to mod debates between flat earthers and globers, and then it just turned into a cluster screw of globers coming in and acting like buttholes?
I wanted to run an open panel that was available for everybody to debate on. If you go back to literally show 1, or even the show before show 1, I had a discussion with Gem Panda about doing it. Because obviously he's the flip side of the coin in that regard, isn't he? So I discussed it with him, told him what my intentions were. But it's so long ago, I honestly can't remember. So, but it is dedicated to tape, so if you want to go back and go, you said you wanted to be this. Oh, did I? Oh, okay. I can't remember.
Well, no, I ain't saying that. Like, because ideas change as time moves on. Some things we thought were feasible aren't, and things just kind of take their own route. I was just wondering if you remembered or not. Whether
I wanted to run a debate platform. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that was my intention. That hence the title, though. Hence me not really understanding the question.
well,
Hey, John.
it is a debate.
You got it.
But
You're making a load of racket, 10th. Can you pop yourself on
oh,
mute?
sorry.
I think what John's saying is, I don't think you had it in mind that it would end up like this.
Okay, did I ever anticipate being in a position where I knew all the arguments and was pummeling fundies? Not necessarily, no.
right, it ended up not being a debate anymore.
Is that you, Dank?
Who's playing drums?
I was going to ask John, any takers on a debate between you, say, and what's that guy's name? The dinosaur guy.
Professor Phil is
Hovland?
still Professor Phil's still in contact with me. He's not really set a time yet or anything. So I told him when I was available, and so it's up to him when it happens, if it does.
All right, Nathan, I got 2 more slides.
Okay.
One we've seen before, one is new.
Okay, I've got you first, which is semi-dingleberry, semi-globeburger.
So you've seen this one. So that OH, the OH, which is in that image, is the geodal horizon here, the flat plane. And the sensible horizon is the one from your eye line. And that's why you take dip from your eye line to the geoidal horizon, as shown here, is the flat plane. Now, in this one, they don't have the geometric horizon O apostrophe H apostrophe. They don't even show it in this one. But they do show the celestial horizon, which is also known as the rational horizon, which is also known as the equatorial plane. And you can see the 90
sorry,
there.
I know you're in the mid-flow. Just got one quick question. So we've got sensible horizon, geoidal horizon, and sensible, geoidal, and celestial. Where is?
Yes.
Let's just go back to this diagram. OH apostrophes horizon, which would be the point I've got my mouse on, although you can't see it. The formerly known as Earth curve geometric tangent point horizon, where this line, that would be a tangent, meets this sphere, that would be a tangent point. That's Earth curve, and it's on a line marked OH apostrophe. Well, on the diagram we're looking at, where's that?
Non-existent.
Just not on there. So there's, just to be clear, on this diagram there is two horizons. HO, actually the flat plane that you'll be utilising for the angle measurement, and OH. So there's two horizons in this image. And then in this image, the second horizon, H apostrophe to O, isn't there at all, but there's a further 3. Is there a further 3 or a further 2? Let's just double check. OH would be... No, OH would be the geoidal horizon. So there's a further 2 horizons in this image. So they've got 3 horizons.
Yeah, they never give you, at the end of the dotted line, from the sensible horizon in figure 7b of the initial one, they don't label it. It's just O apostrophe and then a dotted line showing that this would be a sensible horizon based on eye level with a bubble sextant, basically.
Sorry, one minor correction. There's 4 horizons. There's just one missing off this diagram. I was thinking, no, it seems like there's a missing globe horizon. Yeah, sensible, geoidal, celestial, and marked as OH, geometric tangent point horizon. So there's 4. It's just missing on this one.
No, I've got pictures that have 5 and 6. I have to dig it up. So let's just stick with this one, though. My point is that in this image, the geoidal horizon is the flat surface of the Earth that we saw in figure 7b that's labeled OH plane. And then the sensible horizon in this last image is what they're referring to as the dotted line in figure 7b of the initial one I showed you.
Did you want me to put the last slide up?
Well, yeah, as soon as I wrap up here. So what you've got here is the sensible horizon, which is given to you by a level, a spirit level, which means it's horizontal. Then you got the, as labeled here, geoidal horizon, which is the surface of the Earth in the previous one. And it must be parallel to that. And when you take dip correction, height of eye above the geoidal horizon, you have 2 horizons that you can achieve. One with a bubble, that's whatever height above the actual Earth, and it's parallel, which means the Earth is flat. Then they take you to the center of a circle, which they want you to think is a ball, and say we have the celestial horizon, which is really an equatorial plane if you cut the ball in half, still using a flat baseline in order to get an angle. But that never happens. Everything below the geoidal is not real. This is what we have to get across to the audience. All right, that's my summary. The next one is the Abney reflecting level. I'm going to be trying to find one of these to add to my collection. But basically, it's a telescope with a bubble, with a protractor, and does the same thing as a sextant. And I think it's pretty cool.
So the rest of that is trickery. That center nonsense shouldn't even be there.
Well, John is doing it with his kitchen. He can do it on the tripod. He can do it on a rectangle. He could do it on a banana. He can do it on any. Once you realize what they're doing, you can put anything under the flat baseline that you measure everything from.
Yeah, Earth is flat.
Yeah, you just got to use the flat baseline first. and then you can do whatever you want to with it.
All right, I'm gonna get some tea. I'll be back.
Okay. Everything's working beautifully here. So pleased. Sorry, what was that from Discord? Go ahead.
I was going to say, has anyone ever noticed what YouTube serves you up after the live show's over? Yesterday, it went into some ancient technology deal, and it had like hominids walking around, monkey men, you know. I thought it was interesting.
You realise those are based on your preferences, right? That's individual to you.
Well, that's telling.
Yeah, the same goes to the adverts. So people will say, did you know that you get a NASA advert after your show? And I'm like, no, you get a NASA advert after my show.
I guess, yeah, that's
I get
pretty much the
adverts for?
opposite of what I'm interested in.
I get ads for life insurance because I'm sat here with broken ribs going, I'm in so much pain, I'm dying. And my mic hears that and tries to sell me life insurance. Hey, Chocolate. Hey, Eli.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Good morning.
What's up, Eli?
What's going on, Neil?
Rangers will be playing Game 6 tonight. That's what's going on. The Garden will be rocking if they can get this win tonight. The Garden will be rocking on Sunday.
And in about, let's say, 9-10 months' time, when the new season starts, what will it mean, this game, next season, when you reflect on it?
Nathan, why do you got to ruin my pleasure? My son did that to me yesterday. He goes, Dad, it's all fixed, right? I don't want to hear about that.
Not what I asked. I was trying
Well,
to
the Globers
intentionally...
don't want to hear that the globe isn't real.
I intentionally framed it so that you didn't have to answer any awkward questions about things like that. Your son claiming it's fake, whatever. That's not what I'm asking.
I start all over again. That's all.
They start all over
again. Yeah.
They do it all over again. So, it kind of just goes around again then. I see. But for a brief moment, somebody says we're the best, and then they start all over.
Yeah.
What about if you're not the best?
Then you cry.
But that's most of them, isn't it?
Yeah. If you think about it.
Sounds pretty
You
depressing.
don't win as much as you lose.
Sounds depressing.
I say we're the best because we went to the moon. How about that? Ha ha.
Well, that's what America. That's their trophy. Tell a 70-year-old that you didn't go to. Tell a 70-year-old. Tell a 70-year-old that it never happened, or a 75-year-old. See what you get.
You might be surprised. They might turn around and go, "Yeah, I always do. That was nonsense." You never know. Everybody's different. Why would you suspect that a 70-year-old would have, any less diverse of an opinion than any other age group? People are people. It doesn't really matter what.
Let me rephrase it. Tell a 75-year-old patriot that we never went to the moon.
Okay, I'll do that.
That would depend on the level of the patriot, right? If the patriot's just a American zealot, then yeah, maybe he just might believe it. But if he's actually maybe, let's say, a vet who was in the military, knows how these things work, maybe he might not be so sold on the fact that we took a rocket and took 3 days to get to a moon. That's in the second law of thermodynamics violation. Might not be. I think you'd have a different outcome with that.
And don't forget, you had better reception on the landline from the moon to the president's office than we do with cell phones today with satellites.
Hey,
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected. And if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now, we are joined by Neil, 10th Man, Refracted Curvature, Eli, Chocolate Saying, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
How is it going today?
It is going great today.
It is indeed going great today.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm in a very good mood.
Friday, yeah.
Show's functioning beautifully. Streaming live. It hasn't cut me off in the middle of the pre-show. Happy days all round, really. I'm just elated that my computer works. You don't know how big a load off it is when things work rather than die when you want them to work. And you have to spend 15 minutes setting the entire show up again. Anyway, is there any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle, otherwise known as an altitude angle, from a curved baseline?
That's a joke.
Impossible. Not in AutoCAD.
Syntax error. I know it's not syntax error, but I like saying it. It's like an old 1980s AL computing BBCB reference. Syntax error. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
Just to clear it up, is that the one that we expect to see or the one that we wouldn't expect to see?
Well, we covered a bit of
Even
this in
though
the
it's-
pre-show before you got here, actually, Chocolate. I know you can't see this, but for the audience's benefit, we talked about a few different horizons. So when they're talking about acquisition of an angle measurement from a flat plane, in this diagram from 10th Man, HO, they also simultaneously have a second tangent point horizon, which we're talking about at the moment, formerly known as Earth curve horizon, in this dip claim, marked as H apostrophe, and your line to it being from O apostrophe to H apostrophe. So that's one horizon, the tangent point we debunked in 2020 with the Black Swan. And then you add on top of that your Globeburger/Dingleberry Earth, and that's got a further 3 horizons. So you've got sensible horizon, geoidal horizon, and celestial horizon. Well, you couple that with the tangent point horizon for a total of 4 globe Earth horizons. Any comment?
I mean, that's a hell of a thing, because whenever I've used my eyes and gone out and looked, I've only seen one.
Well, that's
Where are
correct,
the other
Chocolate.
3 or 4?
We've only got one horizon. It's just the horizon in the begging the question proof of nothing perspective hijacking Earth curve calculator would be a tangent point to a physical leading edge of a sphere we debunked in 2020. The horizon we see, on the other hand, is merely the demarcation between ground and sky at any distance where you can see it. Well, in this, that would be your sensible horizon in a sextant with a bubble in it, in other words, an artificial horizon that just meets your eye line, or the geoidal surface in Muppet Vision, because it's not showing you your line of sight, it's just showing you lines that represent parallel with the flat plane you're actually standing on, and will be using if you're navigating, transposed down to the centre of the celestial horizon to give you a protractor over a flat plane. That's all this blue bit is, nothing to do with the globe Earth. It's just representative of the celestial sphere model, which has a flat plane at its centre. And this is just your protractor, all 360 degrees of it, or 180 if you cut it in half.
Big dip, then.
What, sorry?
So not a geometric dip then.
No, there is no geometric horizon to correct for in terms of dip. It's just Al-Biruni called his acquisition of the geometric horizon to derive an R value a dip measurement. So they've taken height of eye correction in celestial navigation and just bastardized it, morphed it with the Al-Biruni dip measurement and called it the same, meaning you've strapped another horizon onto the 3 existing ones.
Sons of bitches.
Indeed. That's right, they are sons of bitches. Not that anybody in particular has done this, Neil. I mean, I'm sure you could actually tie it back to one individual who was led to believe he was on a sphere and thought he was doing great, like Andrew Thomas Young in the most recent examples we can give. Well, I'm sure he's not actually out to deceive people. He probably thought he was doing a really great job explaining why we don't have a geometric horizon with atmosphere, sphere-shaped air, bending light at a standard rate derived from the R value that Al-Biruni can no longer measure if Andrew Thomas Young bends that light out of sight. Further to that, you can no longer acquire angle measurements if the lines that you're claiming to cite are bent, as they are claimed to be by globe believers, including but not limited to Simon Dan, Craig, Fight the Flat Earth, and Mr. Sensible. If you're a member, in the next hour or so, I've uploaded a trimmed out video from yesterday's after show. So if you did watch yesterday's after show as a member in its entirety, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I've edited down a section of that which is calling out those exact idiots, because when we discuss celestial navigation here and angles, they're going to be straight lines that we're dealing with. And ultimately speaking, they are something that you cannot acquire, especially if you've made declarations as Simon Dan, Fight the Flat Earth, and Mr. Sensible have made, that you're never going to get any straight lines. Every line of sight to everything ever is always bent, screwing you completely if you need to make a straight line angle measurement. And as we had yesterday with Virus telling us all about this, you end up in a position where you have to deny your own rhetoric that you've been barking at us for 2 straight years in terms of refracted horizons.
Well, I just want to remind everybody. I just want to remind everybody the sextant has 1 horizon here.
We've only got 1 horizon. It's just not Earth curve. Who was that from Discord? Go ahead.
Well, it was me, but I was just was looking for AI. I don't think AI is in the server right now, but he was talking about this some government entity that tested refraction specifically using different wavelengths of light, quote unquote. And the result was that the terrestrial refraction that would have to be there to duct tape the globe just is provably not applicable. So, but
okay,
I was hoping he'd be here. Give him a second.
Well,
a message.
What that's doing is using an equivocation fallacy. So what's being described is refraction. Is refraction real? Yes. Can we demonstrate refraction? Yes. Is refraction terrestrial refraction? No.
No.
Nope.
Terrestrial refraction is 7/6 of a radius value in standard format. That, in other words, is a derivative R value. Now, they can change the 7/6 bit to whatever they like, but they absolutely unequivocally require R. It's a mathematical derivation of R to assert terrestrial, that's sphere-shaped air, refraction. Well, that's not refraction. Light deviating from a straight path through a medium, or Snell's law as it traverses a different medium, that's real. You can show it. That isn't light bending through air that is sphere-shaped. That's terrestrial refraction. They may call it refraction at the end of the, whatever you call it, prefix, but it isn't. It's not refraction. It's 7/6 of a radius in standard form, or any derivative thereof, R. So you'll need R, and it's nothing to do with light.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that it's a derivative of R, because R is a derivative from a flat plane.
Indeed. So that's when you get down to the nitty-gritty of what refraction actually takes place in the air, not atmosphere. And that would be a negligible amount.
Do we have sphere-shaped air?
That's an oxymoron. Air takes the shape of its container. It's a gas. So the air we breathe, which is a mixture of various gases, does the same. It just takes the shape of its container. To assert that it arbitrarily takes the shape of a sphere is an oxymoron. Air is not sphere-shaped. It's unbonded. It's moving at high velocities in all directions. individual particles of it, not a collection of it in a sphere shape.
Unless, of course, the container was actually spherical.
Then
But
you've got a
that's
spherical
not what they
container
claim.
with gas
They
in
don't
it.
claim that, so
Yeah, but a spherical container with gas in it is very different to saying that air arbitrarily takes the shape of a sphere by this commonly used word, atmosphere.
indeed.
Any evidence that you can have gas pressure without a container, sphere-shaped or otherwise?
There's no way to test that. We can't start out with an example in order to test that.
Isn't that funny that you have laws of nature talking about such effects as entropy, and when Darwin comes to describing a fundamental belief in a heliocentric world with a sky vacuum, Darwin cannot even begin to detail how that could be possible to prove. Hence, it always ends up in begging the question fallacy. Well, if the sky is a vacuum and the gas isn't filling it, then my heliocentric worldview pans out quite nicely. Now, obviously, I'm paraphrasing, so it's obvious the point that they make when they say, well, the sky is a vacuum and the gas isn't filling it. It's just begging the question. You can't even demonstrate it. You need a container just to get a vacuum. And then what are you going to do? Put a balloon in it, pop it, and hope that it stays in a sphere shape? It's just absurd. Even if you did, we'd say, well, you've got a vacuum that's got a container to achieve it.
Right, and the thing about actual vacuums as we create them using containers is that they tend to, well, destabilize the amount of gas and what it does within the space that it gets involved with, right? Well, guess what's out here? It's stable gas. The pressure is stable. It's not changing rapidly in one direction. And that's what we get to see every time we start to do tests where vacuum gets involved, right? It doesn't stay stable when low pressure situations get involved with regular pressure from gas. The gas doesn't stay stable. It depressurizes and then it forms a new pressure, unless it just keeps getting vacuumed out. So that doesn't happen out here. So it's not an open system.
Any evidence?
Well, I can't.
Oh, go on. If there's more to this, go ahead.
Well, I can't prove it to you, but I can tell you how you have to think about it if you want to believe the sky is a vacuum.
Can't we all by now?
A
century of open containment belief.
I'm just trying to
that
think
yields
back
a whole
to...
bunch of grassroots opinions on how it could be like that.
Well, I was just trying to think of a way that would sandwich into John's only two rebuttals were he to ever debate Kent Hovind or Professor Phil Bell, which is to say one of the replies is you'll need a flat plane for that, and the other is that violates the celestial sphere model. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, the assertion that you've just alluded to, John, would require sphere-shaped air. And for it to be sphere-shaped air, it's going to need a radius. And if it's going to need a radius, it's going to need a flat plane to get it. So therefore, it's not a violation of the celestial sphere model. It's more you're going to need a flat plane to get to your sphere-shaped air. Am I wrong?
Wow.
Well, it's the assertion will come with their positive claim of atmosphere. That's when they'll run into problems.
Well, that's what I'm saying. At the point that they say atmosphere, sphere-shaped air.
Can I conclude from this that you can't get a radius value without a flat plane?
That's correct, Darwin. That's how they measured it.
That's tragic.
It is, isn't it? Isn't it beautiful? I like how you, Baldwin, I'll say, use the word tragic when you talk about... I know from a flat earth perspective it's still tragic in an ironic way, but it is literally tragic. Yeah, your globe was taking flat earth measurements to make it. Yeah, how tragic for you. How joyous for me, because it makes me an expert in that particular field, because suddenly there's a parallel between the information I understand about the flat plane and the heliocentric model that I used to ascribe to. Well, one is very much tied to the other now, isn't it? So where's your next level of expertise in heliocentrism, if you want to believe in that religion, going to come from? Well, people who know the root origins of it. Us, flat earthers, that's who. Because that's where your model came from.
Well, I could play virus now and say I'd like to see how, you came up with the sphere from a flat Earth measurements.
I would love to demonstrate it in my kitchen.
I told him when he asked. I said it was elevation angle measurements to Polaris to get to your dual radii.
Did that already. Doesn't work out.
Do you want to explain that, Brian? Hey, by the way.
Hey, Nathan. Hey, what is it you want me to explain?
How you get to a globe from acquisition of elevation angle measurements to Polaris.
Well, yeah, you have to hijack perspective of what we see in frontal view. You take elevation angles to Polaris as you move back away from having Polaris at your 90 degrees. You need a horizontal baseline to go from your position to the GP of Polaris all the time, and the length of that horizontal will be changing, getting longer and longer as you move away from Polaris. So it can't be done without a flat plane. So
look a diagram up of exactly that. So when I was saying earlier that the is bifurcation the right word? Cutting in half of the protractor, this blue area, and calling it a celestial horizon, i.e. the flat plane that you're standing on. And then when you're measuring out to the sky, so if you ignore the labels on this diagram and just have this top line as the sky, then the star is going to get further away from your vantage point as it recedes towards the horizon. That looks something like this. So there's, I know it's pictures of the sun, but if you say it's Polaris, it makes no difference. As you back away from it, it'll recede towards the horizon. So you're taking an angle measurement to depict that. Well, the angle itself has come off a flat plane, but the tool that was used was how the globe was created, because they've then taken the arc of the tool and called it the surface of the ground that you were standing on at the centre of the tool when you were holding a sextant or a protractor in this instance, and measuring things with perspective, as Brian's just detailed, receding towards the horizon. In an orthographic representation, this is how that would look. From your perspective, you just see it going lower to the ground, or, obviously, further around this protractor, changing the angle measurement to it. But every one of those descriptions requires that you've got a flat baseline. This 0 to 180 degree line along the bottom of the tool, that's for flat Earth proof, right there. But they've hijacked perspective. Exactly, Brian. You are far more succinct than I.
Oh no, that's not really, Nathan. Not really. We just explained it a little bit slightly differently. The vertex is always going to be on the surface of the water as they move away from Polaris. They'll have the vertex, at sea level, vertex of the angle. So they'll be using the surface of Earth all the time, and that means the surface of Earth has to be flat because the baseline, the adjacent of the triangle, will be always a horizontal. So if they've got a 45 degree angle, that's 2,700 nautical miles of a horizontal baseline that they'll be using from their position to the GP of Polaris. And the vertex of that angle will be on the surface of Earth. So that means the surface of Earth also has to be flat. That's where they get their dual radii from, because their globe has to match what we see in the sky, has to match the stars, has to match all that, and it can only match that if it matches. It can only match. What I mean is that it can't change any of the radii, the polar or equatorial radii of the globe. They have to stay exactly as they are, because if they try to change them, that would mean changing the angle to Polaris. If you know what I mean. That would change the angles to Polaris, and that would mean changing reality, which you can't.
And when you say the globe, in reality, you're saying the centre of the protractor that you're using to measure, because that's working off the equatorial plane at the centre of a depiction that sometimes has a globe in it, but is actually representing the sky as a celestial sphere. So you've got a celestial horizon in that description with their equatorial plane. Well, the equatorial plane is just a protractor sat over the top of you, showing your perspective view of the world that's flat with a flat sky.
Yeah, it's just a back engineering of a flat plane. That's all it is. Back engineering of a flat plane using perspective. Just mathematical back engineering. That's where they got their dual radii from.
Yeah, it was always down to perspective. It's amazing that we got closer and closer to it. So originally, when we were talking about Earth curve and the physical geometric sphere edge horizon that used to block boats and buildings and is now refracted, meaning they can't measure angles because of atmosphere, just to bring us up to where we're talking about now, we originally said that they were excluding perspective from the curve maths. So you haven't included the fact that things get smaller into the distance. And that's exemplified by, or exampled by, the feet and inches or meters value that ascribes itself to the targets in those maths. So if you look at a building that's, 10 miles away, they'll say, well, it's a 200-foot building, right? There's 10 feet of it missing, or there's 100 feet of it missing. Whatever's missing, they'll ascribe in feet, when in reality something that's 10 miles away has an angular size reduction. So originally we said, well, you need to account for both. Anthony called it a double dip. But then after a period of time when QE had pointed out the linear perspective relationship that only occurs as you look out on a clear day, that means that the representation that they've given you of 8 inches per mile squared, that squared function of curvature, represents itself closely, but not exactly, to the linear perspective relationship we actually see. And up to about, I think it's 1,000 miles, you couldn't tell the difference. So they've hijacked linear perspective and called it square function curvature into the distance at a geometric point that blocks your view. Obviously ruined by the black swan, but that was the point that we changed from you've excluded perspective in your Earth curve maths to you've hijacked perspective. Hence the name is now, flows off my tongue so easily because I've said it so many times, but the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking Earth curve calculator. Well, you can take that one step further now based on what we're talking about today, which is to say that the Earth curve calculator itself is a hijacking of perspective when you talk about the Earth curve, because the Earth curve is actually the outside edge of the protractor used to measure the angles to the stars off a flat plane. So the calculation itself not only requires a flat plane, but also violates the celestial sphere model, because you can't acquire altitude angles to the very derivative star that got you your radius and your sphere model when hijacking the outside edge of a protractor.
Yeah, I mean, the Earth curve calculator is just a perspective and a refractive measurement tool. That's what it is, isn't it? It just amalgamated the two of them and made a way of kind of a way of measuring or something.
Oh, absolutely. I remember Flat Earth Data coming in. He got shouted down by QE. I'll never forget this because he was reading off the manual and describing some part of it that we'd debunked in terms of globe claims. But he was desperately trying to point out, no, look, what they're describing here with similar mathematics, or not similar, just get it right, the same mathematics as Earth curve slash, what do they call it? They just call it Earth curve maths. Well, he's showing that the same exact maths representing the horizon as a physical leading edge of a sphere is being detailed as a horizon, but with absolutely no reference whatsoever back in 18, whatever it was, back in the early 19th century. They're talking about this exact maths. It just is an Earth curve.
Yeah, it's not Earth curve. I mean, even angular size change is only a measurement within perspective. And that is not the whole of perspective. It's just one function of perspective. I mean, just because a mountain has a particular angular size at a distance doesn't mean you're always going to see that mountain or that object at that size, at that distance. The angular size measurement of it is just a calculation based on its actual height. But it's just a calculation. It's not a measurement. The angular size is never an actual measurement. It's always just a calculation. That's why something in the distance can appear bigger or smaller depending on the day. Higher or lower, I should say, if you know what I mean.
Exactly, but there's something in the distance in terms of the physical object description gets overridden by the fact that the model you used to give that target description in the maths is a globe, and the globe itself is a derivative of the tool. So perspective, as you started this conversation off, Brian, isn't just the hijacking of what we see, it's the hijacking and then creation from what we see, measured on a plane, into the globe that's then used to hijack perspective to represent you stood on the top of the tool in orthographic view, because that's all Muppet Vision maths in Earth curve terms is. You stood on top of a protractor.
Yeah, recently. Sorry, Arvin, you go ahead. I say after.
I just wanted to say, I think it was blanked out through Nathan's sound system, but like when they do the curvature calculation and all that about supposed heights of mountains and what it would be like at a height, well, the thing is that's not related to what you're actually observing. So information is supposedly derived from Earth's perspective applied views, but then the calculation that is done is basically orthographic. It's the actual size. None of that end result of that calculation actually applies to your sight. And that's the entire trick.
Exactly. So you've hijacked perspective to get from flat plane to R value based, what I'm calling the protractor, they call the globe. And then from that to back to the perspective view being hijacked to represent that transposition from flat plane elevation angle measurements to the globe back to what you see in reality described as being on a globe. So there's two levels of perspective hijacking, one to get from the plane to the globe and another to get back from the globe to the plane you observe. I mean, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You'd have to go one way and then back the other when you represent it. And that sort of transposition goes from the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth as the viewing point for your celestial dome, and then back up to the top of the protractor when you stood on it using the curve maths. So the level of perspective hijacking has just been detailed at one extra level. And the only person who's come close to describing this so far is John, Refracted Curvature, when he was talking about the same thing, but he was saying when you take a Muppet Vision representation of it in the first level, and then you add on to it another Muppet Vision perspective view hijacked of that Muppet view, of that orthographic view that you started with. It's getting a bit confusing. But John did a much better explanation, but he just used Muppet Vision instead of perspective. Do you remember, John?
Can I make it?
Yeah, that's...
Oh, hold on, Arwin.
Talking about the Earth... You're talking about the Earth curve calculator. Sorry, I had to step away for a minute.
Well, what I'm talking about is when you described how you go from, with your kitchen maths, a flat plane, to the sphere model itself. We're now taking it from that, which is a perspective hijacking that Brian started this whole conversation with describing. Well, that perspective hijacking is very different to the perspective we see in reality being called Earth curve. So what I'm trying to get across to you so that you can say, no, when I described it, I talked about it in being an orthographic representation of an orthographic representation. Well, what is an orthographic representation? Well, it's a hijacking of perspective. It just goes in two directions. The first direction is from the plane we're standing on taking measurements to the globe model. So that's the first perspective hijacking, using the Polaris dropping towards the horizon as you move away from it on a plane measuring angles to it. That gets you to your globe with your dual radii. Well, from there, you've then got to say, well, with this model, we've still got to represent how the world actually presents itself. Well, we'll do that with another layer of perspective hijacking that works in the other direction. And that's the curve maths.
Right? It's to orthographic view and back again.
Yeah, well put. Oh, Arwin, you're on fire. To orthographic view and back again. Exactly.
I recently did a video, the most recent video I did. And what I did is in orthographic view, I made things start changing in angular size. And the opposition are absolutely livid over it. It's like I made it about 3 weeks ago, and I'm still getting comments up to today on it. And most of them just want to correct me on something that's a total straw man, on something that doesn't need correction. Because either they don't understand or they're just being dishonest, whichever. But the whole point of what I was doing was trying to show how using angular size, I was using the Blackpool tower tower and mountain picture, I was showing, due to using angular size and an observer's position, that what the effect of visual occultation does. Because they never want to deal with this effect, because that effect causes something that's much larger in the background to appear much lower in relation to something that's smaller in the foreground. They don't want to deal with that, because that's an admittance that means they have to then go and show that in their globe maps. They can't.
You just cup your mic, Brian. We can hardly make out what you said. Just cup your mic,
sorry,
like
step inside. Yeah.
Cup your mic, like put your hand around it.
I'm inside now. I'm inside. Sorry.
Oh right, okay. Well, that's even better.
But yeah, but the whole point of what I showed, why I was showing things changing in angular size orthographically, was to show what would happen with the effect of visual occultation, which causes something much larger in the background to appear to be much lower than something that's smaller than it in the foreground. But the foreground object is either of equal size or higher, equal height or higher than the observer's eyes. So what happens is you have this kind of like a dropping effect to the larger object in the background. You see it all the time in places like Manhattan, where you have buildings that are twice the height of another building, only a mile behind it. And because of your position, that big building is way lower. I tried to show this orthographically because they want, what they've, and this is Ruhiv trying to argue for, is that orthographic view does take in perspective. That's what they're trying to argue, because they needed to, because they're latching onto a globe model, an orthographic view, where there is no perspective added in. And they're trying to add in, they're trying to say that because the angle to the top of an object changes as you move back away from it, or move to, let's say, away from it orthographically, that means there's an angular size change happening. But there isn't an angular size change happening in orthographic view. Orthographic view doesn't exist in reality outside of a computer screen or a blank piece of paper. It's purely a conceptual thing. We don't view anything orthographically. We view everything in perspective view. And that is what they've hijacked. But the effect of visual occultation, they cannot address that, and they will not address that. They have never addressed it in all the years I've talked about it. That's been 5 or 6 years I've talked about that particular effect. They won't address it. Why won't you address it? Because it means an admittance that it's perspective and not out globe rotate or out curvature.
It always was. It always was perspective. Shout out to the over 100 people watching the show. Woo-hoo-hoo! Please share the show. And a very warm welcome to all of you who've just joined us. If you have shared the show already, thank you very much indeed. If you haven't, please smash the share button. That's the only reason there's over 100 people watching. So yeah, please share the show if you've not done so already. Subscribe if you've not done so already. And if you're unaware, the pre and after show goes out on my second channel. So typically it's a few days delayed because the members get it early. As soon as it's recorded, you can have it if you're a member. Also, there's a member video coming out in the next hour or so, or when I finish this live stream and get to it while the after show's running. But that's basically highlighting a contradiction that the Globers now find themselves in, having spent 2 years barking refraction at us. When they need to measure angles, well, you don't use straight lines for angles. Yeah, you definitely do, don't you? So what are you going to do in sphere-shaped air? Well, you don't. It just leaves them buggered. So me pointing out that there's 3 big names, Simon Dan, Craig, Fight the Flat Earth, and Mr. Sensible, all declaring that you wouldn't expect to see a straight line to anything ever. We've got atmosphere. That causes a lot of problems when people come here and debate celestial navigation and the acquisition of 2 straight lines. So that'll go out to members today and probably to the rest of the general public over the weekend. So be here or be sphere for that. It's called Simon Dan, Craig, and Mr. Sensible's Humiliation. Check it out.
Don't bring them into the argument, because if I'm on the sphere side, then it's devastating.
Wait, Virus was trying to deny that he doesn't line up with them, correct? He was denying?
I don't know. I don't care. He's telling me that we should consider all lines straight. Line of sight is straight. What I see has just got a straight line to it. He said it in various different ways. Okay. Well, I'm afraid not. On a globe model, we've been told by some pretty heavy hitters in this arena far larger than I, how bent those lines are, haven't we, Neil? So it matters not. We know that he needs to appeal to a straight line if he's going to be measuring an angle. That just means they're all incorrect when they tell us about the assumption that this derivative R-value based standardised at 7/6 of that radius value called terrestrial refraction is actually an effect we see in physical reality. It isn't. It's a mathematical derivative of R. But they have come to believe that that's the air we see. And because air is sphere-shaped, atmosphere, everything we see is always bent at a rate of R. That's their belief, and that's what they've told their audiences. Until you need to measure a straight line to something. And then, as Virus points out, I just assume that lines of sight are straight, because I'm going to be measuring an angle now. How embarrassing for all the dickheads that told us how bent it was for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and so you ask him, what was his response to the black swan? All of a sudden we forgot that, right? That doesn't count.
Doesn't count for Ruthie. Who was it that was talking about Ruhif most recently? I forget. Was it you, Brian?
I think him a lot because he keeps on being in contact. Adam, though, too, he keeps on being in contact with.
He's using straight lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he needs to take that up with Simon Dan, Craig Fight the Flat Earth, Mr. Sensible, and a whole bunch of other people who told us how bent those lines were. Now, if he's going to tell me, it's okay, we account for refraction, really, you account for refraction when bending the line that you're measuring, because your lines aren't straight to get angles from. There's no accounting for it if you can't measure it, and you're measuring two straight lines, not just slapping them down in orthographic Muppet view and saying, I've got a straight line of sight now. No, you haven't. Unlucky.
Boy, did that come back to bite them, huh?
Oh, refraction was the death the moment we declared it to them when we told them. The moment you bend the lines, you've got no straight lines for your geometry anymore. By saying refraction, you're killing your own argument. And they ignored us for 2 years. And then when it comes to them actually needing a straight line, hey, Rufy, you're getting this down, get a pen, sunshine. Suddenly, it's a big problem. 2 straight years of them declaring that they haven't got any straight lines, and we told them, they just ignored us and carried on parroting it. It was amazing. Like, the moment you say refraction, it means you haven't got any straight lines for your geometry anymore. Where are you going to get R? Or in this case, how are you going to measure an angle?
Well, it's really bad.
I do clearly remember. Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's really bad because one of them says his hand isn't in front of his face.
Yeah. Go on, Chocolate.
No, because I clearly remember them telling us that it's always refracted, always bent, never straight. And yesterday, Virus clearly said it's always straight, never bent. I mean,
exactly. Never bent because he's getting a straight line angle measurement. Well, okay. No, we get straight line angle measurements off flat planes to get areas of equal elevation. None of these things are talking to spheres, by the way. They're all talking to the exact same elevation angle that was used to get an R value to claim you're on a sphere. But those don't work when you're talking about measuring angles. So if you're talking about measuring angles, the first thing you've got to do is beg the question of a plane that you're using to measure it. And you better be damn sure that you'll be measuring straight lines from that plane to eventually get to the sphere bit. I mean, that'll take some time. But first you've got to get to a flat plane with straight lines on it, because you're talking angles when you're talking navigation or the acquisition of dual radii. You'll need flat planes for all of these things. Spheres don't work out. But what's that you say? It's just okay to assume a straight line to it because angles need straight lines. No, well, you haven't got any on a globe. Yeah, talk to Craig, talk to Dan, or talk to Sensible. They'll tell you just how bent they are.
Well, see, the line they're bending, or the line that was bent, wasn't even the line they were going to acquire the angle from. That's the angle to their presupposition. Like I said, I don't know why anybody stayed a glober after the black swan. I don't get it.
No, you're absolutely right. You've got to get to your...
I have an alternative.
You've got to get to your globe model to presuppose that you're violating it, is John's point. So when you say you're measuring a tangent point to a sphere edge horizon with a straight line that was debunked in 2020, that sphere edge horizon on a globe model was derived from a flat plane. That's John's point.
Yeah. Sorry, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Darwin.
Yeah, I'll go after you.
Right. Yeah, I have an alternative option to why Fight the Flat Earth thinks his hand is not actually in front of him where he sees it.
Is this going to be vulgar?
Huh? No. I'm just saying that instead of terrestrial refraction, it could also just be that he needs new glasses.
Oh, well, that could also be true, but in terms of light traversing two different mediums, in this case air and then a piece of glass that's bent in a certain way, yeah, that I can believe. It's got a whole law attached to it. Snell's law would describe that. That is refraction. But what is described at 7/6 of a radius value in Muppet vision, bending light through sphere-shaped air? That's terrestrial refraction. Light isn't definitely bending his hand into a different non-physical position by a tiny amount because air's bent at a rate of r. Light isn't bent at a rate of r. That's only describable in Muppet vision. It definitely isn't representative of the air we're breathing and the light that we're seeing. He's just wrong. Deluded. Confused by a model that was derived from a flat plane and then described to have light bending around it. Well, he'll need an R value that came from a flat plane for the light bending also, because it's based on R that was got from a flat plane.
Well, a joke I made before, and I don't know how well it went over last time, but according to Craig McNeil, Fight the Flat Earth, and what he says about if your hand is in front of your face, it's not really where you think it is, then that would make Floyd Mayweather one of the greatest refraction masters of all time. Because how does boxing...
How does anybody fight if that's the case?
You think you're defending yourself, but your hand is not where you think it is, so you get knocked out.
They're not really getting hit,
don't descend his example into absurdium. It's true on the globe model. So what I quite like about Craig is he tends to stay in line with the actual rhetoric, the globe rhetoric. He doesn't necessarily, he does often, but not necessarily fall in line with anti-flat earth rhetoric, because he does actually know his stuff, and I can respect that. So when Craig says, my hand isn't where it's supposed to be, the first time that was explained to me, it was Chris Monk explaining it to me while we were looking at the Isle of Man models, and I was wrapping my head around it. And I was saying to him, based on what I'm understanding, the air's always there. Therefore, in the curve maths, where there's a second separate section that says refraction, that should basically always be the applicable value. This is before I realised that begging the question of a sphere-Earth horizon was going to be onto a loser in this debate. But that aside, my point being that the original geometry maths, well, you just get rid of that. You're never going to see physical geometry. You only ever see the refracted value. And Chris was like, yeah, your hand isn't... He didn't say it in these terms, but he gave me a similar example. If you looked at your hand in front of your face, you've still got sphere-shaped air between you and your hand. So to a very minuscule amount, your hand isn't where you think it is. Neither's anything. Everything on a sphere model belief that you might hold about the world that you're looking at isn't really where it's supposed to be, because everything's subject to refraction. So I understood this long before Craig put his description out there of his hand not really being there, and that description is in line with heliocentric rhetoric. It's just not true because we don't see the world in Muppet vision, and light bending through sphere-shaped air is an oxymoron. Air isn't sphere-shaped, and light doesn't traverse through it at a rate of r. And the r value he's claiming atmosphere, sphere-shaped air is bending the light was derived from a flat plane in the first place, making it paradoxical. So ultimately speaking, how he's describing it in line with a rhetoric that came from a flat Earth to make a globe model is actually, strictly speaking, true. His hand on his globe model isn't where he thinks it is, by a very tiny amount. It's not that your boxing glove isn't going to make contact because of that, but in strictest terms, he's correct, in line with the heliocentric rhetoric. Not actually right, it's absolutely absurd. But when you get down to the minutiae, I just don't want someone to write into the comments, it doesn't mean his hand's 50 yards away. You know, no, it doesn't, I realise. At a very short distance, 7/6 is going to have a negligible amount of difference, even if you look at it in Muppet vision. But he's still, strictly speaking, saying that your hand isn't where you think it is because the light bent between where you got it and where you saw it. Well, if that's the case, you completely violate the geometry because you can't acquire it anymore. You've got no straight lines to use when you look out at anything in reality because everything's subject to 7/6 of the radius. that you can't measure anymore. The whole thing implodes.
Yeah, but that's ridiculous right from the start. Because what were they doing in wars when they had to hit ships or targets? Are you kidding me?
QE made that example 4 years ago. If refraction at 7/6 of a radius was true, then it would render the entire militaries of every country totally impotent. And Taboo Conspiracy made this example from a submarine mock-up of a periscope. And he's got one guy talking to the other guy going, how far away is that ship? That's 3 miles. Oh, well, that's definitely real then. That's all. We can see all of that. We could hit that. What about the ship beyond it? 7 miles? Touch and go. Almost refracted, hologrammatic projection, but touch and go. What about the one beyond that? The really small one? Well, that's at 15 miles. Oh, well, that's definitely a hologram. I mean, we couldn't see it, so it's obviously not there. It's obviously a mirage. So we're definitely not going to be hitting that one at 15 miles away because we can't really see it. That would be the conversation you had if you were on a sub looking at something in the distance and accounting for the fact that you couldn't really see it because it wasn't really there because it's subject to 7/6 of a radius value, debunked in 2020.
Yeah, this 7/6R is just, that was a necessity to get them back from orthographic to perspective. Now, as you were saying earlier, like they go from perspective hijacking, so perspective view to orthographic, but then they need to get back to perspective, and that they require 7/6R for that. So that's why there's no 7/6R in, if you look at any of the orthographic depictions of the globe, there's no 7/6R in it, unless you see Rumpus's ones where he tries to put it in there. You know, there's no real 7/6R in it. They just show an orthographic geometric thing, and then they try and add in 7/6R when it comes back to reality, because reality doesn't match what they show orthographically.
Did somebody say they wanted to speak to AI Overlord? Because not AI Overlord is here, if that helps.
That was Eli.
Go, Eli, go.
Oh, my bad. I thought I was unmuted. Yeah, he was talking about refraction yesterday. I thought he could bring it up today. So, hello.
Don't know if he's listening to this conversation. I thought he would have piped up if he'd have heard you, but he hasn't. Oh, there we go.
Well, what if Earth turn is correcting
well, I haven't been asked a question,
refraction?
so I don't know what to talk about.
Yeah, you might want to phrase it as a question, Eli. Sorry, John.
Well, can you expand on what can you tell them what you were talking about yesterday about refraction and what the government was testing that was going on and all that with the lasers and whatnot?
Oh, yeah. So different wavelengths of light refract at different rates through the same media. So this is why we get prismatic effects. So this is validated experientially and demonstrably. So the most common rebuttal to any long distance observation, whether it be the Selenelian, laser test, the black swan, et cetera, ad infinitum, is always refraction. And this type of refraction is always modeled in some way, shape, or form, either using an Earth curve calculator or some kind of quote unquote standard model of refraction, or 7/6R, yada, 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 right? So if that was true, that you had this curvilinear rate of refraction that was ubiquitous throughout the atmosphere that solved all these problems for them, then that means that necessarily you would have some type of chromatic aberration in the final image, right? Because all the light wouldn't arrive in the same spot that it should. Now that's well and good, however, it goes further than that. So for example, the FE core laser test is 25 miles, right? The differential in the off angle from the supposed hump of Earth curve predicts a differential to the target of 90 meters, right? However, the target was hit. So that's 2 orders of magnitude differential, which in and of itself invalidates the globe proposition by direct measurement. So their only Hail Mary is, well, what if light is being curved around the Earth in this, way that matches the sphere so that it can be seen? Okay, that's a cool story. So recently, the military contracted and chartered a test of different wavelength lasers at 120 kilometers, which is obviously greater than 25 miles. And they set up an apparatus to receive the lasers. They set up the lasers, and there were 3 different color lasers. I've already set the baseline that different chroma will take a different path through the same media, right? Because they refract at different rates. That means that they can't arrive at the same place, correct? Pretty simple.
Yeah, chromatic
so what they
aberration.
Did is they did this test.
I like that.
Yep, they did this test. They did this test, right, without any preconceived notions, just trying to satisfy the military charter that they were given. Some universities, I believe Boeing was involved as well. So legit people doing legit stuff, right? Not a bunch of hacks. So they did their test and they got the results and they analyzed their results. And what they found was that their results are impossible if any standard model of refraction, which supposedly answers any of these observations or laser tests that we've done, right? It's impossible. Because all 3 lasers hit the target point in the same spot. They were not separated by the necessary separation that the globe Earth Hail Mary refraction requires. So this means by demonstrable, it's not an experiment, it's a demonstrable measurement that the refraction that they require does not exist. So they appeal to this refraction as a post hoc answer to how the results of observations don't go their way. They then take a Earth curve calculator, right, which is a model, right, and they slide a scale on a little computer screen until it quote unquote matches. Okay, let's be clear, that is not a demonstrable, valid test in the real world. That's just a bunch of numbers on a screen. So they never had any positive proof that this refraction that they need exists. Never. They always just had essentially affirming the consequent fallacies, right?
Yeah.
Now, the government, completely unrelated to the flat Earth proposition, they're just trying to measure the accuracy of lasers over distance for obvious military purposes, right? Where they need the brass tacks of the situation. And they found positive evidence that the refraction that the globers dream of when they go to sleep at night and hold their globe plushie and pet it and say, I love you, does not exist.
Right. And this is an elaboration on an example that QE made with the Sea Sparrow, where they paint the targets with lasers. Same principle, right? That wouldn't be possible. I mean, his example utilises the fact that it's beyond the geometric limitations when they're painting these targets. Painting them means putting a laser dot on it so that you can guide in something to shoot it. Well, beyond Earth curve limitations was the original argument. But now, what about the chromatic aberrations that you'd get if you had 2 different things pointing it at the same time? Well, you get a different effect based on the different rates at the different distances. In fact, you'd never get a decent photo of anything, ever. What's being described as chromatic aberration would mean your entire image in a camera shot at a long distance would be all messed up because of the different rates that the light was bending at the different distances. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah, the Sea Sparrow missile laser, I'm feeding back on someone there. The Sea Sparrow missile laser, that always works below 100 feet. And why it does is it has 2 purposes. It's to target other ships, but it's also to target low-flying aircraft that are trying to fly below radar. So it always works below 100 feet. So it's never working above 100 feet, ever. So, and it works within, and they're painting targets, I think it was 60, was it 60 nautical miles away, or 50, well, 60 nautical, it'd be about 16?
The guy that originally disclosed this to Mark Sargent said 60 miles, and that's what's in the release to the public information. And every time it comes up, it's hinted at. Nah, it works much further than that. But we're allowed to say 60 miles.
Yeah, I mean, they'll never give you the true value because they don't want obviously opposition to know it. But if they say 60 nautical miles, you could speculate that it's a lot more, or 50 nautical. Sorry, you could speculate that it's a lot more than that. But
even at 60, when it was used with the Type 2 missile, I think you're right. I'm sure it's had clarity since that it's ground to ground and ground to air. But either way, it gets clarity at 60 miles because even at that distance, it's absolutely annihilating any geometric obstruction formerly known as the Earth curve.
Yeah, so this laser quote-unquote experiment gets worse.
Okay,
so
go on.
If the standard model of refraction exists, right, or the globe, daydream model of refraction
terrestrial,
exists.
Just call it terrestrial refraction.
Yeah, trashio refraction. Good idea. So this trash refraction, if it was true, in order for this laser within that model to have hit this target in the manner in which it did, they would have had to essentially aim the laser into the sky, if you follow, because they need it to arc, right? You can't just shoot the laser level at the target and hit the target. That would be impossible if the refraction model that they claim existed. They would have had to aim it greater than 45 degrees into the sky. So do you remember back in the day when the FE core laser test came out, one of the Glober's arguments was, well, if you don't laser level the laser, it wouldn't work. And of course, it was a nonsense argument then, just as much as it's a nonsense argument now.
Excellent. Yeah, in general, so most of the time.
Go ahead.
Go on, Brian.
Just saying, general, most of the time when they did them tests, they did another one across Lake Baikal, which is like something like 40 miles, and the laser always ended up bending up the way over there. Maybe it's due to the cold, but the laser ended up bending up the way, not down the way. That was another thing about their tests.
Yeah, so the point in summation is that this model that they dream about fails practical validation in a test in the real world every single time. It never, ever accurately predicts with any form of sequence or repeatability whatsoever. The only times it ever works is by sheer random happenstance. They then cherry pick that data and tell you guys, look, we've proved our proposition because 1 out of 1 billion times it theoretically, within a certain margin, matches our prediction.
Indeed. We used to see it all the time with the Isle of Man debate. People would come along and they'd present their imagery, and by chance they'd present a different image on the same day at a similar time that was from a different camera that didn't happen to line up in the way that the one that they'd cherry-picked was. So I think it was Miles Davis. Anthony caught him out on this. He went up to the top of a hill to catch some imagery of some mountains, and the imagery we got was from some crappy phone camera or a compact camera. And we're like, where's the really good imagery? That just didn't match as well. So what we got presented was the crappy disposable or whatever camera, because that one was nice enough to be cherry-picked and present his argument in the way he needed. So that's the one that got used. You're like, all right, well, what about the thousands of times that it doesn't match your cherry-picked argument? In any event, with that, I'm going to say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. A huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and all that good stuff. I think it was Sasha that hit the super chat, so thank you very much indeed for hitting the super chat. Really appreciate your support. Another massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
I guess when Nathan broke it down, how she was getting caught up in globiolis. That's good. She said she's going to come on one day, so we'll see.
Richie's ace.
What's that?
Said Richie is ace.
Yeah, no, I like her. I watched the video. She's cool. That's why I couldn't understand when she was getting caught up in that. I was like, what the hell?
Well, she's very engaged, right? She really digs into details and gets into it. Well, if you're going to dig into anti-flat earthers, it's not a surprise that at some point it's going to get really confusing, right? So
well, you know what it is? You know what it is? She listens. She listens intently and she grabs stuff like, we'll just stop. That's not right. We cut it right off. Where she may listen and digest the whole thing.
Hold on a sec. Since they used a flat plane to derive the globe, couldn't they then hold a straw man that we are using a straw man?
In a way, because we should just no, you're not being pedantic. You're right. We should be pointing out that they needed a flat plane to get to their model, as opposed to utilising the model they've derived from a flat plane and arguing about how it doesn't work, because technically we're using their model, which came from a flat plane, therefore holding up a straw man. It's not their real argument. Their real argument would be to actually acknowledge the original origins of their model, which is a flat plane, right? Is that your point? Am I missing something?
Yeah, it was just,
Wait, so what you're saying is when we said if the Earth is a sphere with a radius of 3959 miles, and they said that was a straw man, what they were actually doing was straw manning the calling out the straw man of the straw man that they used. Is that what you're trying to say, John?
Yes.
Yes.
Got exactly. It. Because that was a funny retort. Oh, that's a straw man. Really?
Yeah, but there's a problem. There's another level. So the other level is the conflation of the categories, right? Which is the globe versus the Earth. Because make no mistake about it, the globe is most definitely a globe, and the globe exists in a model, which is a modelic interpretation of the actual Earth. So there's no categorical necessity that the one informs the other. It's just an interpretation. And when you recognize that it's an interpretation for a purpose, if it serves that purpose, then it's a valid interpretation to that end. It doesn't mean that it represents reality in any way, shape, or form.
Well put. So if you want to admire it, as I do, for its representation, although it has its faults, of the stars, you can look at it for its beauty and admire its eloquence. You don't have to acknowledge its origins in a flat plane to admire its descriptive purposes for the stars when mapping out you to the outside edge of a protractor you've used to derive the celestial sphere model into a globe model. Just means you're standing on the outside edge of the protractor then. But that's a reasonably eloquent way of describing it, and very beautiful. Nonsense, not your reality, but it doesn't mean you have to acknowledge the other. You just have to acknowledge it's not your world. That would be a reification fallacy.
Would it be fair? Would it be fair on the back of that excellent comment from AI Overlord to state that technically the ballers owe us rent on our model?
Yeah, they do. You're damn right. That's why I tried to put it in a way of saying, well, we've got a link that makes us experts in their model because we have all trained ourselves in heliocentrism to overcome their arguments, and some of us were proud heliocentrists at some stage anyway. But to then go further and actually dig into the origins of their model, and their model is what they falsely ascribe to us with a bastardization of a globe model into a flat, plain pancake that flies up through a sky vacuum. I mean, it was a right hodgepodge, but they called that flat Earth. It's like, nah, the celestial sphere model off a flat, plain elevation angle measurement to Polaris gave you your globe. You owe us rent.
Well, Phil Bell says that he uses the globe model to make predictions. And when you could provide a flat model that makes predictions accurate as the globe, then he'll talk to us.
What he's calling predictions aren't actually predictions. If I say that after midnight, 1 minute past midnight will follow, that's not a prediction. And in terms of what we have in the almanacs, we're led to believe, Let's get the terminology right. We're led to believe we've known that for a very long time. That's why we've got almanacs that predict it perfectly.
Yeah, but I mean, his prediction, the prediction he's talking about is where a star will be in the sky in accordance with your coordinates at a particular time of night. That's not a prediction. That's two things. Number one, it's what Nathan just stated, which is it's just a cycle that you know the ins and outs of. That's not probably the best way to describe it, but it's also begging the question, because he's using rotation of the surface he's standing on as part of his supposed prediction. It's not predicting anything. It's astronomy.
It is astronomy. I purchased a book that tells me where the stars are going to be from 2000 to 2050. And when I called the organization that I got the book from, and I said, how's that possible? He says, well, we can go thousands of years back or thousands of years in the future. It'd just be too big of a book. So we just did 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah, they just need to change the date on the book every 50 years.
I would like
square one.
I would like to disagree with you guys and agree with Professor Phil. The celestial sphere model does do a pretty good job of predicting, but it's a flat plane model, Phil, not a globe model.
Not really, John. It just talks about cycles.
Yeah, that's what what Phil's saying is the prediction, though. We know, we've heard the claim many times. We're not just straw manning him or applying a stereotyping fallacy. We know what he means when he says, I can predict in my model.
Yeah, and his model
Guys,
also
I got a perfect
rotation.
explanation. Check this, bros, out. I got an explanation for this, because this is all a language problem is what it is. Okay, so check it out. So I have a friend, right? He's a list guy. He just likes his facts in a list, right? Doop, 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 in writing. I draw my lists with pictures to show me how these parts are going to fit together. Now, in the end, both things result in the same thing, which is this room being remodeled, okay? I just used an iconographic model to demonstrate the same information. But my model on my piece of paper is not actually the house. In fact, if I never realize actually building the house will never come true. Now, while it does predict it, it is not the same thing as it. It is simply a different modality of iconographic representation of the same information.
Yeah.
So I will agree with Mr. Bell that you have a cool visualization of the data. That doesn't mean that that's the quote-unquote universe we live in.
But that model he's talking about is a flat plane model.
Cool.
Yeah, but he's not making any predictions with it. That's the point. His claim is, and I think, I'm not going to point fingers here, Ram, but I think you're kind of looking a bit past it. His claim that he makes that his model, which is the globe model, which is not his, makes predictions. And part of that predictions is a rotation that is a sidereal rotation that matches the stars. And that he'll predict for you where a star is going to be in your night sky at a particular time, at a particular time of year, right, as part of his rotation of his model. That's not his model. So he's not making a prediction at all for a start. Just a cycle is not a prediction. It's just a knowledge of a cycle, number one. Number two, he's pre-assuming that the Earth he's standing on is rotating and the stars are staying stationary. He's just begging the question.
That's all true, fine and dandy. But what John is saying is everything was derived from a flat Earth because you can't get an angle to even start your predictions or your knowing of the cycles or crediting it to something else. The elevation angle kills them.
Yeah, but that's why I said it's, when Phil says his model, like I said, it's not his, as in it's not a globe model. It's not their model. Not his, not theirs.
Right, but if you have a model and the model doesn't match reality, then what do you got?
Well,
You have the same thing. Listen, you have the same thing you started with, a model.
Yeah.
So the problem is not having a model that's useful to do things and accomplish tasks or present information in a palatable way for different people's modalities that they prefer, whether iconographic, audio, visual, textual, whatever. The problem is when you say, I have a model, therefore this is an exact replica of reality. That's the problem.
Gets one step further when they say, unless you ascribe yourself to a reification of a model, I won't even argue with you.
How would you explain it on your model?
But, you know, that was my point about bringing up, you know, the celestial sphere model as a flat plane model, because that's when they go to talk about anything that happens in the sky, they refer to that model, you know, and they're using a flat plane model. So Phil Bell thinks it's a globe model, but he's just wrong.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct about that, John. No, he's wrong. He's not using a globe model. He's using the celestial sphere model. But he doesn't realize that the globe is a back engineering of such a model.
He's
I
100%
think he
incorrect.
does.
Oh, here we go. Go ahead, Kiwi.
He's 100% incorrect. How many times over the past 7 years have I explained what a model is and what a model isn't?
What kind of model? Supermodel?
About 100 times.
1,000.
You think 100? You think it's only 100?
Well, I'm saying 100. I've heard you. I'm not getting smart. Like, the deal is to have a joke. I'm saying 100 because I've heard you state it many, many times.
Okay, let me say it one more time. They don't have a model. They don't know what a model is. They have Jedi mind tricked you into repeating their same story of a model, and then you're running with it. I'm not pointing at anyone in particular. It's everyone. Except one or two.
It was Arwen. It was definitely Arwen.
And I just woke up, Arwen. So keep it simple. You guys following me? They're Jedi mind tricking you with this model stuff, and then you're running with it. As soon
I'll
as
never
I say
forget
model
it.
stuff,
I gave credit to Cathexis for that for years. So I watched Cathexis. I can't remember what platform it was on, but he was just having a chat with Jen Panda. And they're talking about the model. And Cathexis, very nonchalant as he is, says, can I have a little look at your model? That's all he said. And from there, the total chaos just descended on the show, and, you know, very heated arguments, and, you know, and nothing got produced. And I was like, oh my God, that's really interesting. You ask them to actually produce their model, and when you think back over the times that you debated about their model, normally they shoved a graph in front of you, or a bit of maths in front of you. They never actually showed you the model, right?
Correct. They only have a collection of explanations that don't unify into a single cohesive anything from which you could derive an actual model. They're just a bunch of ad hoc fill in the gaps. If you put them all together,
I'm sorry.
If you put them all together,
I'm interrupting you again.
They're incoherent.
You're still saying what's a model?
A reification fallacy.
No, it's not automatically a reification fallacy.
You said they have a collection of explanations. I can go down to the village idiot on the corner. He's got the same basket. I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
It means they use the word model to represent their collection of explanations and slip it into people who then, misuse that term.
Okay, fair enough. Then a model would have to be a collection of explanations. I need citation, please.
Scientific models.
Why would anyone need a citation to explain somebody else's incoherence? It's just incoherent on its face.
What? Say that one more time.
Okay, if somebody else is being incoherent, Where is there a citation stating that they're being incoherent? It's just incoherent on its face.
You're missing it. You're missing it. I'm not saying you. I'm saying everyone here is denoting or pushing their model, and then I guess they get Jedi mind tricked, and then they're stating, well, that this model isn't explaining this appropriately, so their model's crap when the model didn't exist in the first place. That's what I'm saying.
I'm guilty of it. You can single me out, I'm guilty of it. Because you explained to me before what a scientific model was, and what was, and you gave me the information that I needed. That it requires the backing of scientific experimentation, causing it.
I don't think AI is disagreeing with you, QE. I think AI is saying all they have is explanations, and they say it's a model, but it's incoherent, so it's not. I think that's what AI is saying. He's actually agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I'm guilty.
Well, look, real quick, we can all take a note. This is just a power.
Sorry. Arwin says he doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Let me just lay it out for Arwin.
Just because it's a model doesn't mean it has to be coherent.
Perfect. You give me enough to lead in.
Model.
Perfect, Arwin. Okay. Just because it's a model. Okay. Can you show me the model that you're talking about, please?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Just so we're all clear, when you talk about, I know we're referencing them and their model that we're arguing against and talking about how we argue against it. I get all that. But I'm saying, just so we're all clear, can you just produce now for me the globe model, so we can just have a quick look at it so we all know exactly which one we're talking about, which model?
Oof. Well, the globe model is not easy to just summarize, right? If I'm going to give you the model, I will do it.
No, he doesn't need help. Chocolate. Just leave Arwin to it. Let him go through that thought. Go ahead, Arwin.
Yeah. Well, the only way that I can really present a model is through description, as in how is it established, what is claimed, right? Basically, a model can be a chain of claims that together.
Okay, stop. Just for consistency, just stop. Okay, I'm just going to take you through what QE just did with AI Overlord. Okay, so now that we've got what you've described a model to be, a set of descriptions, can you cite that as being what a model is? So we know that if that's what a model is, that we're all on the same page in Socratic terms, that is actually what a model's defined as, if that's what you're telling me is the reason you can't give me one, because I'm not seeing a globe model, just told that it's a set of descriptions, and no citation for that either. Do you see where this is going, Arwin?
I'm sorry, you asked me on the spot. It's not like
that's okay.
I'm Googling it right now.
So can you do it
too, by the way?
He's missing the point. Can you do it or can't you?
Well, it depends on your standard of what a model is, but by my own standard, yes.
No, that's fine. No, not my standard. I asked you, you defined it and then didn't cite it. So let's all agree upon what a model is.
What's a model?
It's presented right now.
Okay.
Oh, I can't wait.
He's not going to.
This is going to be
Don't
good.
get your hopes up.
I'm guilty.
We've been waiting a long time for this.
This is going to be a joke.
That's right.
Hold on. The gag's not there yet. What does it say? Can you read it?
A three-dimensional representation of a person or thing or of a proposed structure, typically on a smaller scale than the original, right? A thing
Okay, stop.
example to follow or imitate.
Give me enough. So can you give me a 3D representation of the heliocentric model, please?
No.
Why not?
So that definition doesn't work.
You can't physically reproduce it. It's not a design.
Thank you. So in conclusion, there is no globe model, Arwin.
From that specific interpretation of the word,
give me a different interpretation.
One line in many here.
Okay,
yes.
Not yours. Just give us a different interpretation where there is a model at the end of it. Then go.
A thing used as an example to follow or imitate.
Can you give me that thing? Can you present that thing then?
I don't currently have a globe in front
So
of
that's
me.
a no. So that's a fail to that one too then. So still no globe model.
Google a picture. I could Google a photo.
Ball with.
Supposedly.
Sorry,
What are you doing?
photo would be 3-dimensional?
Now, I guess I would have to have like one of those globe model things.
Globe model?
But I
That's
threw
what
it
I'm asking you for. I ask him for a globe model. I'd have to have one of those globe model things to give you a globe model.
This is great.
Do you see the point now,
you know
Owen?
what?
Thank you for playing
so
along.
Would they.
Hold on, I just
So
want to see if
would
he
they,
gets
by
it.
the way.
Hold on. AI
Here, there you
Hold
go.
on.
Globe model. There you go. A physical representation. I don't have one, but I'm pretty damn sure that's a photograph of an actual object that is a model.
No.
Neither do they.
Right, you didn't hear what I said. I said, can you give me a model of the heliocentric model? So in this heliocentric model, show me Polaris.
What? Polaris?
You show me
that's
gravity.
separate.
No, okay, it's not got it. No, that's a total fail. Show me gravity. Why are you typing something else? What's going on? Where's it gone? The model's gone already. I mean, for a second there, it seemed like you had something and we were just picking flaws with it and it went off screen.
Here, heliocentric model.
Sorry, that's not what the thing... This is a different picture. This isn't what you had on
Polaris,
screen.
that's that little star over to the right corner.
Show me gravity.
It's invisible.
Sorry, pseudo-Ramonian for space-time. You can't show me that in this model. This isn't a model.
No.
Okay, so this is a total fail.
Molten iron core, it's too small. It's right in the middle
How
there.
long's this
You can't
fight
see
before
it.
the conclusion will sink home with the audience? I guesstimate 10 minutes. So, do you see now, Owen, how there is no model?
I disagree still. I think you're being nitpicky, but I get your point though. Like a complete full model, that's the whole thing, the whole shebang in one single thing. Yeah, there
The
isn't
whole
that.
shebang, yes.
Just a working heliocentric model. Not like you need to pad it out with like the whole shebango heliocentric model. Just the heliocentric model. There isn't one.
Oh, shebango.
Right.
Why do you think we've had so much fun asking Globers where is their model all these years, Arwen? Did you miss
it's
out on that fun?
irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Here's why.
Yeah.
Here's why. Check it out. What a Glober just heard is, oh, don't worry. Eventually we'll have that. And then once we have that, the Earth will clearly be a globe. No, that's not how it works. Even if you make a model of all your explanations that are unified into a cohesive presentation, that doesn't make your claims within it true.
No. At face value, it's a reification fallacy, no matter what you do and how you dice it.
That's not a model, though. And Arwen's definition, I had to step away for a couple seconds. I missed a little part of it. So Arwen's definition, I caught the last part. That's not a model. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about a scientific model. What is a scientific model? Anyone?
Something that's backed by scientific experiment.
What
is exactly.
Natural science experiments.
Okay.
Cause and effect.
How can they have a scientific model? Hold on. How can they have a scientific model which is based on cause and effect and experimentation, and whether the Earth is a sphere or a flat or a dodecahedron is out of context, because that's a how I question.
Yeah, that was my immediate instinctual reply. This is outside the purview of science. It's not a cause and effect relationship when you ask or describe a model of a sphere Earth.
Oh, look at the Google interpretation, though. Oh.
What?
I Googled
What I was going to mention earlier before Arwen came in is that this is the trick and the power and the effectiveness of Marxist language tactics, where they imbue meaning into a common term and then sleight of hand you with that term later. For example, science means knowledge. Therefore, anything we do is science. Therefore, things that don't follow the scientific method can be scientific models, such as shapes.
Check it out in Arwen's description, Science is Maths. Go ahead, do you want to read this, Arwen?
Hey Nathan, cut that out of this. Cut his explanation out right there, and then just replay it over your channel over and over again until I get it. That's exactly what's happening. He articulated it perfectly. I'm telling you, pull that out.
Okay.
You still want me to read it out?
Yes, once we've given props to AI Overlord. Yeah, kudos. Very succinct, very concise. Go ahead, Arwin. This is the Google scientific model definition. Go ahead.
All right. Well, it doesn't really source even where it came from, but this is Google's opinion, apparently. A scientific model is a physical and or mathematical and or conceptual representation of a system of ideas, events, or processes. Scientists seek to identify and understand patterns in our world by drawing on their scientific knowledge to offer explanations that enable the patterns to be predicted. I mean, I get it, but yeah, it's basically what I think.
That's not
as soon as you said predicted,
can I say something? This is what I see as model,
God.
not scientific model.
It's maths, but go on, QE.
Nah, I don't. It's over.
But either way, based on what we just said, you guys should have all noticed the tautology. Scientific knowledge. If science is just knowledge, then you just said knowledge-y knowledge. Like, it tricked everyone.
Yeah, if you take the word to mean knowledge as an etymological fallacy.
Yep. That's
my
from
favorite
Google,
kind of knowledge.
which isn't a source,
Knowledge.
by the way.
Sorry, there was a joke going on
QE?
in G Plus that rumpus QE. I don't know which one to give priority to.
Yeah, sorry. It's hard. I understand. It gets frustrating. Google's not a source.
It is
Number
in this
one.
instance.
Number two. Go ahead.
It is in this instance. It had there was nothing. It just said Google, and then that piece of text, I read it off because I thought, when I say this, I wonder if anyone will pick up on the fact that I've just literally described it as being a reference from Google. But I studied it carefully before those words came out of my mouth, and then instantly Arwin backed me up and was like, "Apparently, this is just from Google," because that's how it was. That's how it was presented. You can't click on it
Actually, it's
either. I've seen
from
these.
educationvic.gov.au.
Oh, my bad.
Oh,
Well, that
by
ruins
the
it.
way, I'd like to remind you that on top there, Google says about 9,620,000,000 results
No,
for
that
scientific
below,
models.
I don't think that is actually linked to it. If you click that, I don't think it'll take you to that piece of text.
There's nothing to click.
That's what I mean. When I've seen this in the past, I've seen this, it's a fairly recent thing. You do a search, and then you get a piece of text, and you're like, well, I want to go to the source of that. And if you click the thing below, you'll start scrolling through, looking for the exact words that you've just found. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes you might stumble across where they've got it from, but it's never cited with a hyperlink to take you straight to that bit of text. It's just seemingly a Google reference. That's how it presents itself.
Yeah, it's Google telling you what it wants you to think. That's all it is.
Yeah, without any reference for it.
Yeah, it's linked to something that seems like a correct source. But
it isn't. Where's the link? There is no link.
Yeah,
There's a link.
It's when I say link, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's presupposed to be linked to it. That's the right way. I don't have the right word.
It's highlighted from something.
No, there is a link. If you go down the rabbit hole, it goes back to its source, the whole shebango. Now, that's
That's what he said, the whole shebango.
Fair enough.
We can go to Stanford.edu.
Go on then.
We want to go there?
Yeah.
All right. All right. So we'll get to different types and then they'll try to explain it. So models in science. Ready? probing models, phenomenological models, computational models, developmental models, explanatory models, impoverished models, testing models, idealized models, theoretical models, scale models, heuristic models, caricature models, didactic models, fantasy models, toy models, imaginary models, mathematical models, substitute models, iconic models, formal models, analog models, and instrumental models. Then they say models play an important role in science. But despite the fact that they have generated considerable interest among philosophers, there remains significant lacunas in our understanding of what models are and how they work. End of citation.
A lacuna is like a wide gorge, like a gaping cavity. I only know because I asked last time I heard the word.
So kind of like gravity. Everybody uses the word gravity. Nobody knows what it really is, though. So models is kind of like gravity.
It didn't
I
mention.
have a Harvard definition.
Didn't mention supermodels.
Guys, one of those things should have stuck out to you that wasn't like the rest of them.
Phenomenological.
Starting with fantasy.
Fantasy? Yeah, that stuck out to me like a sore thumb.
Well, that's because he read it from Stanford. I have a Harvard definition. Would you like to hear that?
Go on then.
Okay, it says a systematic investigation including development, testing, and evaluation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. That's from Harvard.
That's scientific model because it says testing in there.
Yes.
Well, contextually, then that's incorrect because they're saying testing. The moment contextually in science you say test, that means experiment. So, no. It starts to sound a bit like the scientific method, but no.
And people pay all that money for Harvard?
Well, they're detailing models, aren't they? I mean, we're not criticising them on their description or definition of science, just a model. It's like saying, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater when you say terrestrial refraction isn't real. You know, that's their weapon. Well, you're saying refraction isn't real. No, you're equivocating between terrestrial 7/6R and light bending from its straight path. In other words, light has a straight path, and if it happens to traverse a different medium, it might deviate from that straight path. That's Snell's law. But that's not terrestrial refraction. Well, likewise, when we have them saying scientific model, in most instances, not all, there are, I'm sure, some models that have been based on the scientific method. Correct me if I'm wrong, QE. There might be a possibility that you could actually shoehorn in something that has scientific validity and then make a model from it. Am I wrong?
That would be an actual scientific theory.
That's what I thought. I was going to say that, but I didn't want to sound stupid. I was like, wouldn't the description actually more accurately describe a theory? Because a theory is a combination of either one or multiple validated scientific experiments. Therefore, theory. But that's not model.
Yes, it's even designated as that from Indiana State Edu-Chemistry Department. Listen closely. We'll define it. The important point that Becker introduced is that the explanation of a natural phenomena, i.e. model theory, must be testable by experimentation. In other words, once a model is proposed as an explanation of a phenomena, it can only be considered a scientific model, if it can be objectively tested by experiment. End of citation.
Right.
Nice.
So you could take your validated scientific data in terms of the cause of scurvy, lack thereof when it comes to vitamin C, and then apply it in terms of the dosages that you need to apply to your subjects, at what rate, and you could call that a scientific model because you're basing certain data parameters in a model that you're offering up for use and consumption after scientific validity has been offered through experimentation. That, okay, I don't really like the word model, but fine, in a kind of semi-colloquial manner, it's okay. But it's just a theory. when you're describing the combination of lots of different validated experiments. I still don't see why they've got to use the word model, but it's because it's just an overused word, perhaps. I don't know.
Well, this is getting exciting. I can't wait till next Saturday.
Oh, for Ballbusters?
Yes, we're doing science again, right?
Yeah. Again, it's the main subject matter here. That's what we cover here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What
this
we
is what
are.
they've done to everybody.
Go on.
They say an assertion or a proposition, and then they call it scientific. So in your mind, as the common man, you hear this thing has been concluded through experimental validation. Therefore, I can trust that it's correct. When all as they did was just use that word.
Yeah. When in reality what they did was they substituted scientific validation, that's hypothesis-based experimentation, for the alternative hypothesis unvalidated, or prior to validation being performed. So you have the supposition of if A then B turned into the explanation if A then B. So they're postulating what could be a cause, in some instances for a phenomena that doesn't exist, but we'll brush past that as well. And then saying that's the explanation. My explanation is not if A then B, just A therefore B.
Well, you got to sell the item, don't you? How are you going to sell tires if you don't say they're scientifically validated?
Well, after they hijacked perspective, they needed to hijack validity to, sell it, didn't they?
Yep. That's when they relabeled the laws of nature scientific laws. So the laws of nature, merely descriptions of things, admittedly descriptions of things that occur always and wouldn't be laws if they didn't, but they're not explanations. Well, it's quite useful to have somebody who takes something that's described as, well, it's a law of nature, it's always occurring, that's how it is. It's a law of nature, a scientific law. Suddenly you've got this comparison between something that just describes something that happens and science. Now, science doesn't just describe things that happen. That's a description. Now, an eloquent description of things that are called happening always is a law of nature, but not a scientific law. But they call it that so that when they describe why Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is occurring, that can be a scientific explanation. No problem, children, eh? Scientific explanation like the laws are science. Well, no, the laws of nature are not science. They've not been through the method, and they haven't explained why they're happening. So they're definitely not science. But when they say they are, your brain that was referred to earlier by AI Overlord as having an understanding that when that word science is used, the implication is empirical validation. Well, then they've made the circle complete. You're thinking that the words being used mean empirical validation, and they're justified in calling it science because explanations are science, aren't they? Like with the laws that are scientific, when they're not. So the whole thing moves down the mountain nice and smoothly. Everyone believing that just saying science means your shiny hair is validated by cause and effect reasoning based on an experiment that was based on a hypothesis that was based on a phenomena. None of which is true when you're mixing chemicals to make shiny hair or make tyres grip better. But you say that we've done the science, or in the most recent Johnny Depp trial. I noticed that lots of the commenters, I'm a bit suckered into this, but it's nice to have a link to it, are going, check out the difference between these two pseudoscientists, the two psychologists. The one is clearly biased, packaging everything to make it sound like her analysis is actually the opinion, in reality, of what's occurred, whereas the one that's presenting the science is far less biased. You're like, what? Just because she said that she's reporting to the court and she follows the science? Hollow words, because she isn't science. But everyone got suckered in. They knew who to believe. Because she said the word. She had a better magic trick. That's all she had. A magic trick that convinced every juror, I don't doubt, that her words were far more empirically validated than anything the other psychologist said. Because she's following the science. You mean a chart with a tick box after a few questions that are well thought out? I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the DSM. I think it's a very worthy piece of literature, and I think in many instances it does accurately describe people's psyches after evaluation. But is it science? Is it hell?
And that was all beautifully demonstrated for the past 2 years as the words "follow the science" have been used to get people to put a diaper on their face and walk around and think that that's cool for 2 years.
Easy now.
No, that's the
Well,
older
listen, we
busted
actually
now,
have
like,
we actually
they
have
new
some
stuff now.
salient.
Oh, well, it might be back, Chocolate. Despite everything.
Oh, we've been cancelled.
All right. Anyway,
Yeah.
What are we
let's
talking
segue this into something of recent impact, where we were arguing whether or not Professor Dave was actually a professor based on his credentials in some academia, where we just said basically he does fit the explanation for the definition of a professor because he's professing faith in his religion. Same with followers. Followers and professors are linked to religions. So yeah, I have no problem using that word as long as it's parsed out properly with the meaning intended in the context, which is, if you're a professing follower of the heliocentric religion, I expect you to be faithful to it.
No, he's not professing to be a professor, like my use of the colloquial and the actual. He's not. He's claiming to be of the highest academic standard type of professor. He isn't, but that's why he's using that word. Besides, he's not calling himself Professor Dave. Is actual, if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty of it, if he was ever to weasel or wangle his way out of it, or this is how I would if I was so pathetic as to give myself that label, is to say that's just my channel name. His channel name is Professor Dave Explains. That's the name of his channel. Can you pop yourself on mute, 1985? Oh, he has. Or she.
What it is that science, the term science, has been used in an intimidatory way with the public. So people get intimidated when they hear the word science because they think calculation, people in white coats, really, really clever people, who am I to challenge them? And that's the way it's been used. So people are intimidated subconsciously, I think, when they hear the word science. And so when that's used within a statement, that something is scientifically valid or trust the science or scientists have said, then the public just generally people go, well, I'm not dealing with that because I'm not going to, even if they don't agree with it, they feel they have no way to challenge it. They're intimidated by it. And that's why someone like Professor Dave calls himself Professor Dave. It's actually a bullying tactic, is what it is. It's intellectual bullying.
Right. Any further comments on this?
That's a good point. It kind of is. It is more peer pressure based, basically trying to bluff to people that aren't super intellectual, like don't have a lot of intellectual background. It's a bluff to them, like, oh, you can't outsmart me, so fall in line.
With that, I'm going to say another huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's after show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams for hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, joining as a member, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.